I'm going to crack on because my talk, I haven't managed to get it done in 25 minutes yet. So and knowing that I'm waiting for others, I'm like, no time. So we'll just crack on. Let me just press my time. Da, da, da. Right. So Pardot business units. That's what I'm here to talk about today. My name's Tracy Keeling. I've been playing around with Pardot for about 7 years now. So I've touched business units quite a few times. So in that time, I'm now starting to pick up, what's good about using them, what's not so good about using them, and there's a couple of little gotchas along the way just to be careful of as well. So I thought it was a good opportunity to come and share them with everyone. So first thing I'll do is just talk about just the agenda. So we're just going to look at sort of actually what are Pardot business units, because I know quite a lot of us will probably know, but there'll be some who don't, when we should be looking to use them, and then the pros and cons and the gotchas. So that's the plan. And within my slides, if you see any reference to either business units or any of these terminology, that's what I'm trying to talk about. And I'm going to say Pardot. The likelihood of me saying marketing cloud account engagement at any point during this, apart from now, during this presentation, is very unlikely. So, what is a Pardot business unit? So, in effect, it's actually just individual instances of Pardot. So, what Salesforce have now done is created them as business units, and you can see them separately within your Salesforce setup, which is down here. So you can see, if you're in Salesforce, you've got your setup menu, and you type in Pardot, account setup comes up, and then here's all your business units. Now, what you will see, even if you're on the V1, so if you've had Pardot for eons and eons and eons, you will be on what's known as the V1 connector. But even you, if you come into your Salesforce setup, you will find a business unit. You've never used it, you're not even aware of it, you don't even need to know about it, but you are in effect now logged as having a business unit, but just the one. So yeah, and they're all linked, so you can have multiple ones and they can be linked to one Salesforce, so that's how it's sort of. So when we're trying to look to use business units, that's, there's many reasons why people look at using them, but the four main ones sit here basically. And they're the real reasons when you start to think about when you should be using them. So this is kind of the times when you'll hit these limits. So there's four basics. So we're talking about hitting usage limits on Pardot content. So within each Pardot instance, you have usage limits and content limits. And they're all stored on your account setup page, and you can see the limits there, and it tells you what they are. Now, if you start to hit those, then obviously you've either got to look to see if you can buy more of them from Salesforce, which is potential with certain ones. So, for instance, automation rules. You can actually buy extra automation rules in bundles of 50. So you get a limit of 200, but you can buy more of them. However, when it comes to engagement studios, yes, there might be an ability to buy more of those, but there's 10 repeatable ones. So this is that new functionality where you've got a prospect can go into the studio more than once. You can actually only have 10 of those per business unit, and that is a hard limit. There is no getting that extended, that's it. So that may be a reason to look at having a separate business unit if you're starting to hit those lots and you want to extend or you want to separate it out a bit. And quite often it is about wanting to separate out when you're starting to hit those limitations, or you're finding that you can't separate your brands out properly, or you've got geographic limitations, or having everyone on one is just a mess. And so that's when you start to think about, oh, I wish I had more than one, I wish I could separate it, and oh, we can, let's use business units, and that's the way to do it. So you've got data sharing issues, so that's kind of normally around where you've got third parties and things you want to separate, and you've got security reasons around why this person can't see that prospect, but they need to be able to see that one. If there's really strong reasons, then that's a good reason for separating. Brand is another way they look at separating, so if you've got a customer who's got very defined brands, and it's unlikely that someone who's in one brand is going to be in the other brand, that's a good reason. And quite often it's around geographic. So when we start to now get into like global situations where we're using Pardot all over the place, and it starts to become language challenges, and like you've got GDPR obviously in Europe, you've got different data regulations elsewhere, they can be reasons to look at doing this kind of segmentation. So, the pros. So it does, it makes life a lot easier. So when it comes to segmentation, of users. So if you're, it's kind of is really important when you're talking about when you get into bigger customers. With the smaller customers, you're much better off staying in one business unit. But when it comes to like segmentation of users and the content that you want to separate based on brand or other reasons, get the word out, Keeling, yep, it just makes life a lot easier. Also, because you're now going to more than one Pardot.org, really, as a business unit, you now get that usage limit again. So for every business unit you have, you'd have 10 of those repeatable engagement studios, for instance. So that's one way of doing it. And also, you then get the ability to have defaults per business unit. So you've got, within Pardot, you will have your default tracker domain, but you can actually have one then per business unit. So it means that you've got less likelihood of them sending things out using the wrong domain. Also, you can have more than one domain within a Pardot instance, but the actual default one, you can only have one of those. So you can have separate out that way. So they're the useful ones. Now, I will say this list looks not that large, but they're really important ones, right? So just because I'm about to show you a slightly larger list, that's not necessarily meaning it's negative. Yeah, see, I told you. Sorry. It's true, right? But I will say the biggest one, the most important one, is that right, there is a massive cost implication of going to more than one business unit. Now, obviously, when I'm saying the reasons you would look to do it is because you're a bigger customer, you're becoming that, you're growing into a bigger person, like company. If you've reached that point, then there needs to be some detailed looking at what is actually the benefits, weighing the risk and where you are with how you're on your journey with Pardot and everything else, and where your journey's going as well. You know, it's not necessarily just where you are now. If you're starting to think about the future, actually having that business unit now might be costing you a bit more than you want, but long term, it's a really good plan. But it is expensive to do it. In the grand scheme of things, actually, Pardot, in comparison with Marketing Aloud, is pretty cheap anyway. But there is still, you know, the costs are the costs, and they multiply based on the number of business units. You've got to think. So yes, there's immediately the cost for the extra business unit, but then you've got to think about, oh, I've got to design how this works. And if I'm designing in one, I've got to design across both. I've got to make sure they're working together. I've got to, you know, how do they collaborate? What's the differences? You've not had to have these conversations, all these thoughts before. It's all just been in one, so you just get on with it, and it all just works together. And it's what goes into what. How do I want my reporting to be? How's that going to roll up across the two? Where's it all going to sit? And obviously, you've got the implications on build and the maintenance as well. You've got, you know, you've in effect now got two Pardot orgs that you're maintaining alongside your Salesforce org. This is a really important one. It's actually probably more of a gotcha, to be honest. It's in here, but it probably should have been in the gotchas. You can't, so you've got a default tracker domain in one Pardot org. You can't use that same one in the other Pardot org. That catches quite a few people out, so yes, it definitely should have been in the gotchas. So the impact on the Salesforce core setup. So when you're looking at the business unit, you can't actually sort of see which one that contact is in without adding extra dev work. So it's very easy to sort out. You know, we just build an extra field, we just do this, we just do that, and that's got, right, who needs to see that? Where do I put it on the page layout? I've got these extra fields I need to create. It's more stuff. So you just need to sort of bear all these things in mind when you're thinking about it. And that's exactly what I'm just saying there. You know, you won't be able to see across the B, you can't see them, which BU they're in, there's difficulty there. Also, sharing prospects across the business units. Now, you can do this. I'm not saying you can't do this, but Josh is going, no! And the reason for that is because to do that is enormous. So there's some work that's been done by another consultancy that sort of makes some visibility possible that you can utilize, but to actually look at all the data that's on the Pardot that you now see in Salesforce, it doesn't give you everything, and you've got to sort of do so much more development to be able to see all that information. So it's really, you just need to bear that in mind. So that's why when I was talking about it, it's really important that if you are going to segment and have two business units, you think about how often is that prospect going to go across into the other business unit. Ideal world, you want to be able to split it so that a prospect is only ever in one business unit and the likelihood of them needing to be in a second business unit doesn't exist. That's the ideal scenario. Doesn't necessarily mean it happens, but then you need to work out whether you can get away with not worrying about those ones that don't cross over, or whether you're going to absorb the cost of dealing with that. And obviously, then you've got into the user management. So that actually, you know, it's not difficult, but it's another burden. It's another problem with sharing across business units. It can be done. It's not like we need to be done with standard Salesforce, but actually keeping an eye on it, make sure you're doing it right and not missing someone out. It goes wrong regularly, basically. And as you can see with everything that we're talking about here, once you've even fixed how it's going to work, it's going to require a lot more admin time. There's implications there. And once you go into the actually having two separate Pardot orgs, if you've got users in one Pardot org and users in another Pardot org, and they're doing things like building templates, going off building engagement studios, how are they naming them? What are they doing with them? Are they making them do completely different things? How's that going to affect my reporting? Am I going to be able to actually roll up the information from each of these business units to get some viable information that makes sense? So it's entirely possible that you're going to end up with divergent processes. That word's like, why did I put that on my slide? So yeah, you know, there's a high level of control that needs to be taken when you start to go down this around how the users are actually going to be using these individual Pardots and making sure that they are working in a consistent manner. That's the word I was looking for. Cool. I'm talking super fast. Breathe. So I think we already just started talking about it. So the contact sharing is like the biggest gotcha. It is a massive problem in that sharing across business units just isn't great, basically, and you'll have them go into one business unit, but then because they're in, so if you've got a prospect who's filled in a form on one business unit, that then comes down, creates the contact in Salesforce, that person is then synced to that Pardot business unit. Then they fill in a form on the other business unit. They will exist as a prospect in Pardot, but they will never come into Salesforce unless you do that great big incredibly costly thing that we were looking at on the other page. And that uses all the Pardot APIs and things like that. So also there's license implications around looking at doing that. So that's a big one to be wary of. Now this is a little bit of a shame, actually. So the B2B analytics, we're looking at that your one. So I don't know if you all know that there's B2B, oh, my tongue. B2B analytics app. So that's using CRM analytics. It enables us, you have a certain amount of reporting that you can do within there. Gives you some really good apps, lots of great kit to look at. But when you put more than one business unit in, it will only ever work on the business unit you originally set it up on, unless you then pay for Einstein analytics licenses on top, or you've already got them. So, you know, a lot of companies at this level will already be using Einstein analytics anyway, or whatever you want to call it. It keeps changing the name, but the license is still Einstein analytics. So you have to have those extra 2 licenses to be able to amalgamate all the business units and then look at that information. So yes, you might be able to have analytics, but you would only be able to look at one business unit unless you're paying extra. A few hidden costs, are there not, when it comes to using more than one business unit? So there's, some companies have got their own dedicated sending IP, so by default, you share an IP when you're using Pardot, and that's fine. But if someone has actually paid for their own dedicated one, it only works on one business unit. So that's an interesting one to note. And if you have, so if you're using Pardot business units and you want users to be able to go into more than one business unit, they actually have to be on the V2 connector. So I don't know how many people are aware of the connectors. I am so not going into that conversation right now because that's another huge thing to talk about. There are two different connectors. This is the newer one, so it's obviously pushing us towards using newer technology. But to be able to do that, you also, not only do you have to have the V2 connector, I think you also have to be on the Lightning app. So they're really important things to note. So when you're looking at using more business units, you have got to be in Lightning. There is no trying to stay in Classic and use more than one business unit. Now this last one, user sync sharing. So it actually has its own page. Because this was a little ditty that actually made me do this whole presentation. I was like, I really want to talk about this, just so that everyone knows. And I suppose I could have just done it on the Pardot user group. But no, let's come to London's Keeling and do a great big presentation. So what happens, so this is to do with when you set up a Pardot business unit. So when you set up a Pardot business unit, you come across here and you set it up, and you've got this Manage Users button. And in the Manage Users, you identify down here which users or roles or groups that you're going to allow to have the access into this business unit. Now, when you look at that, you're like, actually, that's super similar to if you're used to looking at Salesforce, when you're sort of setting up sharing on folders and things like that. So it's exactly the same concept. And I actually wonder if this is the same for Salesforce, but I've got a feeling that it will just be this Pardot sync that's having this problem. So what happens is, so for instance, if you've got a role in here, a role hierarchy, and the lowest role in that hierarchy is France, so they're using France, so anyone who's France is allowed in here as a marketing user. So they'll go into this, by the way, I took this off the web, I have no idea who Claudia is, but it's her super unit, and so I've put France role in, so anyone who's got the France role is going to have marketing user access into this business unit. So I've got all these users set up here. Then we've gone, oh, actually, customer's gone, I need to split this. I want to split it. I want there to be a Northern France role and a Southern France role. No problem, because when I set this up, I put roles and subordinates. So that's going to pick that up, no problem, all good, don't worry about it. No, doesn't work. So obviously, normally in Salesforce, that would work, as far as I'm aware. No, it's not working. So what happens, we literally just found this by pure chance. It syncs at the time that you, so if when I add that role in, the role in internal subordinates, it syncs at that moment in time and goes, right, okay, the roles in internal subordinates are France. Oh, there's no internal subordinates. Okay, it's just France. And then it keeps syncing anyone who's got France, and it's looking for anyone who's got France. When we created our new North and South France roles, it didn't sync. And look, because it's already picked up the role hierarchy and gone, there was nothing below it. It's not checking to refresh the role hierarchy. Really minor little thing, but it took us ages to find it. Thanks, Josh. So yeah, I thought it was really good to share it because it's really weird little bit of functionality that's happening, but it's just one of those gotchas that I thought's worth mentioning to everyone.
Tracy, how did you fix it? Did you break it and reconnect it?
No, actually, all I did was just pull over the two lower level roles. So I just went into here and added in the actual subordinate roles. So I put in North and South France and just pulled them over. And then it's, because I then went, oh, by the way, these two roles also exist. It went, okay, yeah, I'll find everyone who's got those roles. And then all the data started working again. Which was we were like, why is this not working? Madness, absolute madness, but that's the thing. So, wow, I've actually done it, like, I must have spoke so fast. So, I just thought I'd put a little, like, synopsis slide together to talk about this. So, business units are great, right? They have their place, they're really important, they're really useful. You know, when customers get to the point where they're reaching their limits, there has to be a solution, and this is the way forward. And it allows them to, like, split things and work together. But you need to be careful. You need to make sure that you are going to benefit from that. Just because you've got, like, brand A and brand B, and, oh, wouldn't it be nice if the data was separate? There are so many ways that you can achieve that in Salesforce. You've got folders in Pardot, right? All your reporting, the majority of it, you should be getting from Salesforce now. If you're still using Pardot for your reporting, we need a different conversation. I mean, there is reporting that's useful in there, don't get me wrong, but like the majority of your reporting using campaigns properly, please, you do not need to be splitting out based on brand unless, like I was talking about before, unless you're like, there's closed doors, that brand is not allowed to see that brand's prospect. That's like a hard and fast rule. Now, is that hard and fast rule because that's the way it's always been? Or is that hard and fast rule because it goes against like some legal requirement? Legal requirement, okay, no problem, we'll create a new. Just because that's the way it's always been doesn't mean that's the way it now needs to be, and there needs to be that level of pushback around, well, that's okay then, if you want to do that, but the cost implications are and that's what needs to happen. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Pardot business units. I like Pardot business units. I use them all the time because I have to, because of the size, some of the size of the customers that I'm working with and how they're splitting things out. But that is so important. Make sure before you make that decision, you've looked at it all and you've got that understanding and thinking about all the extra things that that's going to require and setting up the framework for other people to support in different ways, because that's what it's about. It's making sure you've got your framework in place. I mean, it's the same when you set up Pardot from word go, right, and you're looking at your campaign structure. You want to make sure you've set that up. When we go down this route, we need to make sure that we are set up in the right way again. And also that we are going to get enough benefit out of the extra cost this is going to incur, because it's not only a cost of money, like just going straight out, it's also quite a burden on time for the people working in the company who are supporting this piece of kit. And the other thing to think about now as well is there is actually quite a lot of stuff that we can do in Salesforce now. There's so much more available. Pardot's API is getting stronger. There's a lot more we can do in Salesforce. So do we actually need to do the segmentation in Pardot? And do people actually need to be logging into Pardot? Do these people need to be in Pardot, or can they see and work and do what they need to do just in Salesforce with the kit that's available in Salesforce? Where does the restriction need to be, or the split out? Does it need to be based by creating a business unit, or could it just be based on how we configure Salesforce? So, any questions? Or does anyone have any extra gotchas that we can share? Because I love a new gotcha.
So, just a general question about your customers using business units. Do you find that it's normally a brand split, or a regional split, or like the same company but like product split? What's the common split of business units that you see?
Geographic, mainly. I mean, I have seen brand as well, but mainly geographic.
Yeah, big enterprise customers.
Yeah. Because it is that massive cost. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I do have a couple of companies who've gone down the brand route, even though I'm like, but there is that, you know, as long as the brands are completely separate, then that's a fine, it's also a good split. But I think a lot of people go down that route before they actually realise that non-sharing of contact implication. And what that means further down, because that only sort of starts to become apparent once you've been using it a little while, and when you start realizing, why am I not seeing, this person's filled in this form, why are they not in Salesforce? They are, but they're on another business unit. So yeah, it's all those kind of things.
A slightly random question.
Yep.
What's the significance of the admin on the business unit? You know, on the page where it says, okay, here's your business unit, here's the name of it, here's the ID.
Yeah, that freaks everyone out. There's none whatsoever. Absolutely none.
Does it have to even be an active?
No, not after it's happened. So no, because it's literally, this is the person who set it up and clicked the email link that set the Pardot up. Yep, that's all it is.
Just wanted that kind of confirmed.
Yeah, no, don't worry. You see that question asked a lot out in the ether because everyone freaks out about it and wants to change it. Yeah, that is a normal. Don't worry.
So my question, so 4 times certified in Pardot, which includes business units and reporting and analytics.
Cool.
As a partner. And the Salesforce advice guidance is business units, for customers go to a partner to implement them.
Yeah.
Which is fine, and it's all good. I work with a number of different customers that use Pardot. Fortunately, none of them have business units. However, I just wanted to know in reality, if you actually stop the packaged fields syncing, and if you do, have you actually ever...
Oh, sorry, that's just let me know I'm upset.
Ever been involved in a project where somebody's actually built something with their Pardot API to get scoring grading into Salesforce?
Not yet,
No.
but I'm looking at it.
Okay.
I'm excited by the idea of being allowed to do it.
Okay.
But again, because it is like all the API and all that sort of things, it's such a cost, and also the APIs are like improving at the moment. So doing it now there could be an implication of cost further down the line to adjust it.
5, so.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the thing is, I am at the point where I've got a customer who's almost at breaking point with how it's now working, and really, we should do it, but it's a conversation, because it's such a big change, and they've got, when you've been using it like this for such a long time, they've got all these automations, a lot, they're on force.com as well, so they've got a lot of code triggering off from these fields that are directly on the contact, and that means ripping that out and then looking at how we get that to work with related records. So, for me, I'm like, oh my God, this is such an amazing idea. I really want it, please.
Yeah.
But I'm not the person who's got to pay for it. So, so yeah, I mean, I really want to do it, but I'm not. It's not happened yet. So.
No, it's just from what I see, the Pardot API could be better documented. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
You've ever come across anybody using it ever?
What, the API? We're using the API. Oh, I use the Pardot API, but we're not using it to do that bit yet. But we're using the Pardot API all the time. Josh, do you want to add anything on that? No?
Pardot API, like in terms of touches, a lot of the objects you probably think you can get to, you can't. So it's even though it's getting better, it's still quite limited. A lot of them are read only, so you can't actually upsert back onto them. It's better than it was 2 years ago, but still, yeah, it's probably version 6 before you start using it really heavily.
I know Nebula are using it as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we're doing it. I have nothing else to add though, really.
Yeah. Cool.
I guess, yeah. If you want a prospect of multiple business units, you'll need duplicates in Salesforce.
Yeah, sorry, that is another way. Yeah, that is another way to deal with this problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where you need the solution to stop the duplicates.
Because because duplicates in Salesforce makes me go like
Yeah.
that. Because that goes against the grain in completely other ways.
Think about your Salesforce admin unhappy and break all your duplicate rules and everything.
Yeah. Well, I'm also like a functional lead as well, so the idea of it just sends me into like can't do that. But sometimes you have to give in. Any more questions? Yes, Ollie.
Have you got any information or intel on the future of business units in terms of anything coming or any further improvement?
I haven't got anything. Have you got? Do you know more?
There was a lot of roadmap. Everyone's attended one of the recent roadmap sessions, so they're going to really improve the setup. So being able to say, okay, I want to create a custom field, but I want to create it in all business units rather than having to manually do that.
That got me very excited. I remember that now.
You have to do everything in every business unit, and they're going to have a streamlined setup. Obviously, make your purchasing decisions on current functionality. It was in the roadmap, so it should be safe harbor within a year. Some of those on the tracker domain across multiple business units as well should be coming within a year. Again,
Should safe harbor.
should, but yeah. So there are some developments coming, but I do not want to trust it, so I don't know.
You can share your lightning content across business units as well. So your templates and landing.
Yeah, the Lightning ones in the Lightning Builder, and so the content stored in Salesforce.
Yeah, it's in CMS, but
Yeah. Anyone of you else? Sorry, he's going, I want a cat! Thank you.